During his youth, he fought in the Austro-German and Franco-German wars, and after a successful but not exceptional military career, he returned from his retirement to lead the German army to victory at the Eastern Front when World War I broke out, only to install a quasi-military dictatorship with Erich Ludendorff as the war progressed. He died in the harness after serving as the president of the Weimar Republic for 9 years, but not before appointing Adolf Hitler as German Chancellor. This sure is going to be a complex story. Oh, and an airship was named after him. That did not end well. On the 2nd of October 1847, Paul Ludwig Hans Anton von Benckendorff und von Hindenburg was born as the eldest son of Prussian officer and landowner Robert von Benckendorff und von Hindenburg and Louise Schickwart. He was born in Posen, a province in eastern Prussia. His parents, Robert and Louise, married in 1845, and Louise bore 4 children. Paul was the eldest, and he had a brother, Otto and Bernhard, and a sister, Ida. The family had to move often as Robert was stationed throughout Germany. 3 years after Paul's birth, Robert was promoted to captain and led a company of men for the next couple of years. As you can see, militarism was a part of Paul von Hindenburg's life from early on. From 1859, at the age of 11, he went to the Wallstatt Cadet Corps School. Hindenburg reminisces in his memoirs, "Being a soldier was inevitable for me. The service for the king and the land was tradition in my family." During his education at the military school, the general way of life was a Spartan one. There was barely any free time or time to leave the school to return to family. Food was rationed and the physical exercise drained Hindenburg, though it also began molding him into a real Prussian soldier, known for their iron discipline. 2 years after Paul arrived, his brother, Otto, was sent to the cadet school as well. When his father was stationed near Berlin a few years later, Hindenburg was 16 by now, he started attending the military school in Berlin. It proved to be a new world for him, as he was in awe of the military parades on the open Platz. At the age of 18, Hindenburg had the privilege of being appointed as the page of Queen Elizabeth of Bavaria, the widow of King Frederick William IV. A year later, Hindenburg graduated from the Berlin Military School and became a second lieutenant in the Prussian army. As for his personal life, in 1879 he married Gertrude von Sperling. The couple had one son, Oscar, who would play an important role later in Hindenburg's life. Furthermore, he had 2 daughters, Irmgard Pauline and Anna-Marie. Hindenburg's political views were that of someone representative of the Prussian aristocracy. He was very conservative, a proponent of the monarchy. His last words are rumored to be about the German Kaiser, more focused on Prussia than on Germany, and a strong nationalist conviction. Though, and this is interesting about Germany before the unification in 1871, a sense of nationalism within the German Länder, provinces, tended to be stronger than an overarching German nationalism. At any rate, Hindenburg was a man of the army, indifferent what art and literature were concerned, and convinced that solely the aristocracy could claim roles in the military and government. Hindenburg had an honorable military career in the Prussian and later the German army. In 1866, when due to Bismarck's foreign policy and attempt to unify Germany, the German-Austrian War erupted, Hindenburg fought in the Battle of Königgrätz. 4 years later, in 1870, again as a result of Bismarck's foreign policy and attempt to unify Germany, Hindenburg under von Moltke saw battle at Sedan against the French army. After these wars and the unification of Germany, it saw a period of relative peace during this period. And it was a while, we're talking over 40 years here, from 1871 to 1914. Hindenburg attempted to distinguish himself in the military. Eventually, however, he went through the ranks at a normal pace, and in 1911, as general and military governor of Hanover, he decided to retire. Decorated with the Order of the Black Eagle, the highest order of chivalry in the Kingdom of Prussia, and after over 45 years of service, he left. Hindenburg reminisced war was not in flux, and I recognized it as a duty to open the way for the younger generation, and in 1911 I begged for my absence. An interesting detail is that Hindenburg was mentored by Alfred, Graf von Schlieffen, whose name may sound familiar. He designed the von Schlieffen Plan that was supposed to, in case of war with France, defeat the latter in record tempo. And this von Schlieffen taught Hindenburg that defending is feminine, attacking is manly. Hindenburg would apply this strategy religiously and actually defeat the Russian army at the Eastern Front during the First World War, 3 years after his retirement. But we'll get to that. On the 1st of January 1887, as required by German military protocol, his immediate superior, the head of the department of the General Staff, Colonel von Schlieffen, wrote a report on Hindenburg. The commander, von Hindenburg, is a magnificent major that stands out due to a keen interest in servitude, mobile activity, and therefore he encourages young officers who are serious and energetic with an accurate perspective. The German army had fond memories of Hindenburg as a capable military commander that always kept his head cool. This would come in very handy when the biggest war mankind had seen up to that date would break out. After the events in 1914 resulted in the First World War, Germany attempted to instigate the aforementioned von Schlieffen Plan. This failed miserably, and in November that same year the war was reduced to stagnant trench warfare. On the Eastern Front, Maximilian von Prittwitz commanded the German 8th Army, and this 8th Army was supposed to defend East Prussia from Russian attacks, but it abandoned said territory under Prittwitz's command, exactly the opposite of what they were supposed to do. The German General Staff strongly disapproved, and this led to von Prittwitz being dismissed by von Moltke the Younger. Paul von Hindenburg was 66 years old and had been retired for 3 years, but he was asked by German High Command to command the 8th Army. On the 23rd of August 1914, von Hindenburg became the commander of the German 8th Army on the Eastern Front. Erich Ludendorff became von Hindenburg's chief of staff, and the duo complemented each other very well. Within a week, they attained their first major victory. Ludendorff was an excellent organizer and planner, whereas Hindenburg was the almost fatherly figure that kept his head cool in the face of battle. The Battle of Tannenberg, one of the most famous battles of World War I on the Eastern Front, waged from the 26th to the 31st of August. The German 8th Army annihilated the larger Russian army and pushed the Russians further back into Russia. Over 75,000 Russians were killed or wounded, and over 90,000 were taken as prisoners of war, whereas the Germans lost under 15,000 men. The Russian general Alexander Samsonov committed suicide as a result of this defeat. These events have been colorfully captured in the novel August 1914 by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Shortly after, from the 6th to the 15th of September, the First Battle of the Masurian Lakes saw another colossal victory for the Germans, and these victories resulted in the myth of General von Hindenburg being cemented in German propaganda, and a cult of personality developed around him and would last until the end of his life. Though Germany was in arms against foreign powers, at the home front, especially within the military high command, there were conflicts as well. From 1914 to 16, there was an internal struggle among the German military high command. Erich von Falkenhayn, the commander-in-chief of the entire German army and commanding troops on the Western Front, wanted to establish peace with Russia in order to concentrate German troops on the Western Front, whereas Hindenburg and Ludendorff were convinced they had to keep fighting against the Russians. They were convinced that the Russians were beaten, but they were not defeated. Several well-known German offensives that failed resulted in Falkenhayn losing prestige. He was responsible for the Battle of Verdun in February 1916, which was disastrous for the Germans. In June, at the Battle of the Somme, over 160,000 Germans lost their lives. On August 27, 1916, Romania entered the war on the Allied side, whereas Falkenhayn predicted Romania would remain neutral. All in all, the German front was in a dreadful state, with over 1 million lives lost already. Von Falkenhayn was dismissed due to these losses and his faulty prediction that Romania would remain neutral, and von Hindenburg and Ludendorff took over the German High Command, or Oberste Heeresleitung. The war, as a result, entered an even more radical phase due to these two men. One of the first things Hindenburg did was instigate the so-called Hindenburg program. This program meant that the entire German economy was to be mobilized for the war effort, a so-called war economy. The aim was to double the output of the German industry in order to cover the lack of certain materials such as ammunition and guns. Germany became a quasi-military dictatorship where von Hindenburg and Ludendorff could not push their military-oriented laws through parliament, but the opposition could not do anything without their consent either. Slowly, von Hindenburg and Ludendorff attained more political power, and eventually they managed to ensure that Germany mobilized its entire economy for the war effort. In April 1917, the United States joined the war on the Allied side, and shortly after, the Russian Tsar was overthrown by the Bolshevists. In 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed between Germany and the Soviet Union, ending the war on the Eastern Front. Emperor Wilhelm II granted von Hindenburg the Hindenburg Star for his victory at Tannenberg, perhaps in an attempt to up the morale of the battered German army. The Russian defeat and the impulsive new decoration given by Wilhelm II did not force any miraculous breakthrough, however. On the 29th of September 1918, Hindenburg and Ludendorff informed the Kaiser that the war was lost, and 1 month later Ludendorff resigned, but von Hindenburg stayed on. Germany was defeated, however. The losses had been tremendous and on a scale never seen before in the history of mankind. Eventually, in 1919, he too resigned as Chief of Staff of the Army. Due to the domestic political opposition by socialist politicians, Hindenburg, Ludendorff, and with them many military commanders believed that Germany had lost the First World War, not due to military defeats, but due to internal opposition and sabotage, the so-called stab-in-the-back myth. After the First World War, Weimar Republic was established. It was an extremely turbulent time for Germany, with the Spartacist uprising, the Kapp Putsch, and Hitler's Bierkeller Putsch. The period 1918 to 1923 is covered in my videos about the Weimar Republic. We'll skip ahead to 1925. The president of the Weimar Republic, Friedrich Ebert, passed away. Elections were held, yet no potential successor gained an absolute majority during the first round of elections. Hesitant, von Hindenburg put himself forward during the second round. Wilhelm Marx from the Zenton Party received 45.3% of the votes, whereas Hindenburg received 48.3%. The communists refused to vote on a candidate other than a communist, but if they hadn't, who knows what could have happened in Germany's history. Hindenburg, as briefly mentioned earlier in this video, was an anti-democratic conservative monarchist. Yet he swore an oath to respect the democratic constitution of Weimar, and perhaps surprisingly, he adhered to this constitution. Biographies have described him as an excellent constitutional head of state. From this point onward, I have to give a disclaimer though. From here on out, there is a lot of historiographic debate about von Hindenburg's intentions, both with the Weimar Republic and appointing Hitler as Chancellor. We will get to that in a minute. At the end of his 7-year term in 1932, his physical and mental strengths rapidly diminished. He was 85 at this point, but he once again put himself forward as a candidate to oppose another candidate, Adolf Hitler, who had risen in popularity in the years previously. He decided to stand candidate, but Hindenburg was re-elected with nearly 20% more votes than Hitler. However, the domestic political situation of the Weimar Republic was torn between far left and far right, and Hindenburg had to reappoint multiple chancellors of cabinets. There were internal conflicts and struggles with the communists and the Nazis, not just fighting each other, but fighting the democratic institutions as well. In 1933, after his son Oscar, Franz von Papen and his secretary Meissner, among others, insisted on appointing Hitler as Chancellor, convinced that would be able to keep him under control. Hindenburg gave him and appointed the loathed Bohemian corporal, as he referred to Hitler. At another occasion, after a fight with Hitler, he is documented as saying, "That man for a chancellor, I'll make him a postmaster, and he can lick the stamps with my head on them." It is commonly acknowledged that von Papen and others thought that would be able to control Hitler once he was appointed chancellor. A misjudgment, to put it mildly. At the end of his life, von Hindenburg probably suffered from dementia, occasionally not being aware of what was happening around him, though some sources such as von Papen contradict this. Confused as he was, he could not exercise real power, and Hitler took this opportunity to consolidate his own. On the 2nd of August 1934, at the age of 86, Hindenburg passed away. After von Hindenburg passed away, Hitler passed a law that merged the position of Chancellor and President, which, in a sense, made him the de facto dictator of what would become Nazi Germany. Eventually, due to his aggressive foreign policy, the Second World War would erupt. There is debate among historians whether Hindenburg consciously appointed Hitler as Chancellor, giving him a stepping stone to becoming a dictator. Some historians claim he wanted to reinstate the German monarchy, which fell after the First World War, when Wilhelm II fled to the Netherlands. Hindenburg had a lot of contempt for Hitler, a corporal from Austria. While Hitler was a lower-class corporal, Hindenburg was convinced of the superiority of the German nation and realized that Hitler could bring cohesion among not just the German far right, but perhaps the German nation as a whole. At any rate, this imposing figure, his broad face and the recognizable mustache, his calmth in public, his reputation as an eager-to-learn family man, his military past as a patriot and soldier made Hindenburg a symbol of power and stability, inviting Germans to trust him despite the economic, social and political crises that shook the country. This image has been used and maintained with the aim of achieving political objectives, first by the Kaiser, then by Hitler and the Nazis, but as well by industrialists with financial motives, supported by the emerging activity of advertising mass media. Many trinkets and products carried the image, drawing, or the name of Hindenburg. After his death, streets, buildings, and public places, boats such as the SMS Hindenburg and a prestigious airship, the LZ-129 Hindenburg, the largest ever built, were named after him. This has contributed to the shaping of a myth of Hindenburg that seems to have permeated society in all its forms and in all its lessons, and remained after his death in part of the German spirit. I mentioned this beforehand, but there is a video available on my channel about the Weimar Republic from the weeks after the First World War until 1923. It covers the Spartacist uprising and the Kapp Putsch, among other things. Thank you for watching this video. So, what is an event or a person with regard to German history that you would like to know more about and perhaps see a video of? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to this channel. See you next time.